Last week, Senator Kamala Harris of California sent a letter to the State Department Inspector General, Steve Linick, demanding that he investigate whether State Department officials worked with Rudy Giuliani, quote, in violation of restrictions on engaging in partisan political activities. NBC News is reporting that Inspector General Steve Linick made an urgent request tonight to brief several House and Senate committees tomorrow about documents related to the State Department and Ukraine. And joining us now is Democratic presidential candidate Senator Kamala Harris of California. She's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator Harris, I have to ask you, is it possible that your letter to the Inspector General is what triggered some kind of inquiry by him that has him rushing to Congress tomorrow for a closed-door briefing?
I'm sure it's possible, Lawrence, but, you know, I mean, as Claire McCaskill said earlier, the inspectors general, who have certainly been carryovers from a previous administration, I think know that fundamentally their duty is to ensure the integrity of the agencies that they serve. And on this issue, the State Department and Mike Pompeo, at the very head of it, really have a lot of questions to answer about what they did to facilitate Rudy Giuliani's engagement with Ukrainian officials, and what resources and taxpayer dollars were used to facilitate basically the request of political favors from a foreign head of government by Donald Trump.
Mike Pompeo's letter today to the chairman in the House refusing to comply with their request to depose State Department witnesses, complained of bullying in their tactics because in their notices of the request for these depositions, they reminded the Secretary of State what the law is and what they would interpret as obstruction of their activities. Tonight, in response to Pompeo's refusal, those chairmen now have sent a letter to the Deputy Secretary of State reminding him that it is, as they put it, it is a criminal violation punishable by fine of up to 5 years in prison to by threats or force or by any threatening letter or communication influence, obstruct, or impede or endeavor to do so the due proper exercise of their investigative powers. Is it proper for them to be citing these criminal statutes when communicating with the State Department about obtaining information?
Well, listen, essentially what we are talking about is a concern about the suppression of evidence in an inquiry that is a legitimate and important inquiry about how the resources of the Secretary of State and the State Department have been used, and have they been used for the political benefit of this president and not in the best interest of America's national security. And while we're talking about who's reminding who, I think Congressman Mike Pompeo needs to remind Secretary of State Mike Pompeo of what he argued when he had Hillary Clinton before the Committee on Benghazi, because it reeks of hypocrisy and of one standard in one situation, and when it doesn't suit him, then all of a sudden he goes quiet and shuts down the process. So there is that, Lawrence. But the bottom line is that I'm very happy and excited that the IG has kicked in and is doing the job that he was designed to do as Inspector General. And I think the inquiry is proceeding as it should in that regard. But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo really has a lot of questions to answer. And frankly, I think that we all see that he is on the verge of obstructing justice if he's going to suppress evidence that may be very well evidence of a crime.
William Barr, Attorney General, has more questions to answer, too.
Yes.
Secretary Pompeo is in Italy tonight, a week after, it turns out, Attorney General Barr was secretly in Italy, which we've now discovered, and he was there once again, apparently trying to help the president's reelection campaign by trying to investigate and undermine the origins of what became the Mueller investigation. You asked Attorney General Barr whether he's ever been asked to do investigations by the president or anyone in the White House. Let's take a look at the way he handled that question.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
the president or anybody else.
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested,
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
hinted.
I don't know.
So for William Barr, it all turns on the definition of the word suggest.
Well, clearly for William Barr, it all turns on the fact that he doesn't want to answer a direct question with a direct answer. And, you know, again, it just, you know, not only in hindsight, at that very moment, I think it became clear that he was not being forthright with the American people and the American and the Congress of the United States of America. And that's why I have called for him to come back and under oath testify and answer that question yet again. That's why I called, to your point, Lawrence, on the Inspector General of the State Department to begin an inquiry into how the State Department was used in this matter. That's why I've called and actually have a letter that I've written to Jack Dorsey to say that Donald Trump should have his Twitter account suspended because he clearly has been abusing the terms of service and the terms of use.
I want to ask you about a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, a senator who you know well, you work with. Yeah. He issued a written statement today taking his own position in the battle between Donald Trump and the whistleblower. And guess whose side he's on? He wrote, "The person appears to have followed the whistleblower protection law and ought to be heard out and protected." He said, "No one should be making judgments or pronouncements without hearing from the whistleblower first and carefully following up on the facts. Uninformed speculation wielded by politicians is counterproductive." He said, "The distinctions being drawn between first and secondhand knowledge aren't legal ones." Were you surprised that Senator Grassley took that position against Donald Trump on the whistleblower?
You know, I've not always agreed with Senator Grassley, but he has been a champion in my time in the Senate. I've watched him in defense of whistleblowers and the whistleblower statutes. And I think, with all credit to him, that he, unlike so many others, has been willing on this matter to put country before party and has been willing to have the courage to stand up for what is right, as opposed to defending or coddling this president's bad behaviors. He
was clearly attacking, disagreeing with the president there, and the current chairman of Judiciary, Lindsey Graham.
Listen, if you've met Chuck Grassley, you'll know when he puts his mind to something, he sticks to it.
Certainly does.
And on this one, I happen to agree with him that, listen, we have to protect whistleblowers because this, in the design of our democracy, is one of the most important methods by which there is transparency and disclosure of bad behaviors in government. And it therefore is an opportunity for us then as the American public to know what is happening in a way we can correct and hold accountable bad behaviors and abuses of government and abuses of taxpayer resources. So good for Chuck Grassley on this one, and I hope that more of my colleagues will recognize that this is really a matter about the integrity of our system of government and our democracy and should not be a partisan issue. We should all stand together saying that we have in common a desire to know that there is integrity in these systems, and in particular when it relates to our nation's security.
Senator Harris, please stay with us because when we come back after this break, I want to ask you about new reporting in the New York Times tonight that President Trump wanted to shoot immigrants at the southern border, and when he was told that was against the law, he said he wanted to shoot them in the legs. When he was told that was against the law, he said he wanted to build a moat at the border, fill it with alligators. It is the wildest, craziest stuff we've heard from Donald Trump about the border. It's all reporting in the New York Times. I want to ask you about that right after this break. Please stay with us.
Sure.
Thank you.
I will.
Right. Tonight, the New York Times is reporting new details about ideas President Trump has for the southern border. According to an excerpt from the new book, Border Wars, written by two New York Times correspondents, privately, the president had often talked about fortifying a border wall with a water-filled trench stocked with snakes or alligators, prompting aides to seek a cost estimate. He wanted the wall electrified with spikes on top that could pierce human flesh. After publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot migrants If they threw rocks, the president backed off when his staff told him that was illegal. But later, in a meeting, aides recalled, he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. That's not allowed either, they told him. Senator Kamala Harris of California is back with us. Senator, your reaction to this new reporting about the Trump ideas for the border?
I'm beyond words, to be honest with you, Lawrence. It is outrageous. You know, we have a person occupying the White House right now that is not only lawless, not only probably the most unpatriotic president we've ever had. We have someone who is mean and mean-spirited and is confused about what is the real measure of strength and power. Because if he were clear about it, he'd understand that the true measure of strength and power is not based on who you beat down, it is based on who you lift up. But what you are telling me is that there is a report that basically has the President of the United States advocating what will be torture, mayhem of human beings, when there are so many other tools available to address what we need to do to deal with immigration, which, by the way, is a passing comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway towards citizenship. But I'm beyond words to describe how outrageous I think most Americans would feel about what he advocated. And by the way, just like what we saw as the bipartisan reaction when people became aware of a policy that was about putting babies in cages and separating children from their parents in the name of border security, I believe that the American people will recognize that advocating for moats filled with snakes and alligators, that the American people would be outraged regardless of their party affiliation, just knowing that's not reflective of the values of who we say we are. And it's just not reflective of what should be a modern president in America who values human rights.
There's another passage in the reporting of these New York Times reporters about the Customs and Border Protection chief when the president said to him that he wanted him to stop letting migrants cross the border at all, anywhere, with no exceptions. If you get into trouble for it, Mr. Trump told him, I'll pardon you. Now, does that qualify as a possible article of impeachment?
Well, listen, I mean, what he is basically saying is if you commit a crime, I got your back. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the fact that we have the President of the United States encouraging someone to break the law. Again, further evidence of the fact that Donald Trump is lawless. And as I've said before, you know, look, Maya Angelou told us that, listen, you should listen to people when they tell you who they are the first time. Donald Trump told us who he was when he was campaigning for office, when he said, if I shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, I can get away with it. He told us then who he is. And all of this is evidence that is evidence of the fact that we knew a long time ago. And so let the impeachment proceedings begin. And I have full faith in the ability of the United States Congress, certainly in the House of Representatives, to do the right thing.
Senator Kamala Harris, candidate for President of the United States, thank you very much for joining us tonight on this important news night. Really appreciate it, Senator.
Take care. Thank you.